Namaskar and welcome to one and all present here. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all our viewers across the globe for this webinar today. This webinar is presented to you by the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. The Ganges Mississippi Dialogue, or GMD as we call it, is a social platform under AAYM through which we deal with three major issues: education, healthcare, and economic challenges. Through a series of talks, seminars, and live chat shows by eminent personalities, AAYM endeavors to bring together the think tank of the world. This is a series of dialogues with people as part of an exploration into the nature of this universe and its knowledge systems from the perspective of modern science and Indian philosophy. Racism, xenophobia, hate speech, and discrimination are reportedly on the rise across the globe and need to be countered with robust efforts to promote fundamental freedoms of expression and association, provisions of targeted support for vulnerable groups, and equitable and meaningful implementation of socio-economic rights. This webinar, titled Revisiting Human Rights Across the Globe, will have our expert panelists highlight the key human rights issues that have emerged in light of the recent incidents across the world and offer policy advice and recommendations to combat all forms of discrimination and human rights abuses. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a team of distinguished panelists. Our first speaker for the day is Professor Ved Nanda, a distinguished university professor, director of the Ved Nanda Center for International and Comparative Law in the University of Denver College of Law. The second speaker is Priya Shah, the executive director of Human Rights Congress for Bangladesh Minorities. As the third speaker today, we have Dr. Adityanji, President of Council for Strategic Affairs, founding president and chairperson of Board of Directors, the International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. Thank you so much for joining us today. The moderator for this webinar is our very own Sri Chaitanya Patil, an IT professional with several years of experience to his accolades. Chaitanya ji has been connected with multiple NGOs and is presently the technical head of AAYM as well. I welcome you all and thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Chaitanya ji.
Namaskar. Thank you, Andrila ji. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. I, Chaitanya Patil, welcome you again in this another episode of Ganges Mississippi Dialogue. लोकयात्रा भयम लज्जा दाक्षिण्यम त्यागशीलता यत्र न विद्यन्तो न कुर्यात् तत्र संगतिम. This was said by Acharya Chanakya almost 2500 years ago, which means one should not stay where we do not have favorable conditions for livelihood, where people don't have any fear for and shame for multitude, or where people do not have a feeling of sacrifice or philanthropy, or people don't have any fear towards law or the social responsibilities. These are the basic human rights, and today's topic that's which will highlight around all the basic human rights and the revisiting need, because in the contemporary world, the issues like racism, xenophobia, hate speech, abduction, rapes are reportedly across the globe on the high rise. We need a robust response, and because all these issues are with more gravity of the human right crisis, we have our esteemed panel with us to highlight and talk around these recent incidents across the globe. Before introducing our speakers, I'll just tell you there will be a ticker on the bottom of your screen where you can ask your questions if you have any. And also, GMD YouTube and Facebook page is also open if you want to ask any questions. Coming back to the speakers, our first speaker, the personality who doesn't need any introduction, no need of any introduction, Professor Ved Nandaji. Ved Nandaji is a professor of professor of law at Stern College of Law, University of Denver, and serves as director emeritus of the International Legal Studies program there. In 2006, Professor Nanda was honored with the founding of the Nanda Center for International Law. He served as vice provost at the University of Denver from 1994 to 2008. He holds or has held numerous official posts in international, regional, and national professional and civil society organizations. He is widely published, having authored or co authored 24 books in various fields of international law. For his public service, legal scholarship, and contribution to human rights, Professor Ved Nanda has received a number of awards, including the Padma Bhushan, Gandhi King, and Ikeda Award for Community Peace Building. Welcome, Nandaji. Before starting, I would just like to wish you a belated happy birthday. Yesterday, it was your birthday, and I'm not sure, but it was showing me that you completed 87 years. Nice to have your blessings.
Chaitanyaji, thank you for your very generous introduction. Dattaji and my distinguished panelists and all who have joined today, my sadhar namaskar to everyone. Chaitanyaji, as you know, age is really not biological, so I'm here. And first of all, I do want to thank you and the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation for presenting this topic on human rights. Human rights are pretty much misunderstood, and human rights also are weaponized, and human rights also at the present time are politicized. But as you look back, human rights idea is not just today's idea. As you go back in ancient India, human rights, right from the time of Rig Veda and on, human rights have been central, human rights have been critical, human rights have been essential in the ancient Indian traditions, in Vedic tradition. One time I had the privilege of doing comparative study of religions. And at that time, I looked at the Hindu Dharma and human rights in ancient India. Today is not the day for that, but I simply want you to know that in our own tradition, ancient Hindu Vedic tradition, the thought simply is that human beings are created in the image of God. And what it means is they all have divinity, they all are equal, and that they have inherent dignity and they have intrinsic worth, each one of them. And that is the basics. So today I won't go back into that history, but I would simply say that dharma, vasudeva kutumbakam, they connote what ancient Indian tradition thought about human rights. And then I want to simply come today, which I would consider in very loose terms and don't take it literally, that the modern counterpart of dharma may be international human rights. Now, international human rights in contemporary setting goes back to the Second World War and after that in its new reincarnation. Because initially on slavery, piracy, you can think about sometime humanitarian intervention, that human rights could be used. But in the modern setting, human rights idea has its origin in death and destruction that Second World War brought to us. And because of that, when the effort was in order to create a new world order, League of Nations had died. They formed the United Nations, and the purpose was to see no more wars. And so, maintenance of international peace and security was the main purpose. But at the same time, in the United Nations Charter, the recognition was there that countries that violate human rights in their own countries, on their own people, they are lawless in the international arena. And so, peace and security and human rights, they are intertwined. And therefore, in the United Nations Charter, there was an idea that promotion and protection of human rights, along with peace and security, be the main ideal that ought to be realized in the future. Now, human rights idea itself, that all human beings have intrinsic, inherent rights. Nobody has given them, not the Constitution, not the UN Charter, not any international setting. As Veda said, they are divine. They have rights because they are human beings. And that is the basis on which the thought simply was that this idea is a very, very powerful idea. At times, there is an issue that you talk about rights, what about duties? Because in India, in ancient tradition, duties were very, very specifically identified. And that is the righteousness, that is dharma. So I won't go back into all that history, but I simply want to mention that this idea of human rights, in the sense that all human beings are equal, they have got dignity, they have got worth, they are to be treated appropriately. This idea itself is so powerful, so potent. It's probably more powerful than all the armies of major powers. At one time, when you think about Napoleon and Napoleon's imprint on Europe, then I think the point simply ought to be made that it was the Declaration on the Rights of Man that came out of Paris, came out of Europe, that idea itself and that one page talking about that declaration, it had more impact upon Europe than all the armies of Napoleon. And today, it's that idea of human rights that had been instrumental in telling people in South Africa under the oppression of apartheid and carrying just that one page, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that you can't take away my inherent right. I'm black, you have mistreated me, but I am equal to anybody else. I'm a human being. I have got inherent rights. You can't take them away from me. You can't kill me. You can't put me in prison without giving me any charges. You can't mistreat me. And that idea is a very, very potent idea. I think I can't take you through all that happened, but I think I'd like to provide a context. I had been privileged when I came to study in this country after the University of Chicago, Northwestern. I was at Yale doing my doctorate. And the very first course in human rights anywhere in the world started there. And the person who was the deputy director of human rights directorate in the United Nations, Egon Schwab, he used to come every week to teach for one course, and we were only about 11 or 12 PhD, the JSD and LLM students. And he would at that time bring in, because there was no text, there was no treaty. What had happened was that there was Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And after that, he was working on the treaty, both the International Covenant Treaty on political and civil rights, civil and political rights, and the Treaty on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And we would work on that treaty. And I decided at that time that if I am teaching and going to teach, I'll teach international human rights. I came to the University of Denver, and my faculty, my dean permitted me. And just after coming in year or 2 years, and it was late 60s, that I had the second international human rights law course anywhere in the world. And then we began international human rights law clinic and invited students from all over the country. came from Colombia, came from Wisconsin, came from many places. And we took some international human rights law cases out of Latin America, out of Russia, which at that time was trying to see that Jews cannot go to synagogue and all that. So we took some cases out of Japan and Korea, those during the Second World War atrocities. And that is the context I simply want to mention that to you. That it's in that setting that I started teaching international human rights. Today, we've got plenty of United Nations treaties, United Nations institutions, United Nations norms, United Nations processes. But the point I want to make is only 2 points. One is that we need to look at the origin of international human rights law. Origin is Second World War. Origin is Nazis' oppression of their own people. And therefore, human rights began with saying that no country can treat its own people the way it wants to. Because the country, because of its own sovereignty, each country used to say, if we are not challenging international peace and security, and the United Nations Charter said these are magical terms. Aggression, you've got wars, human rights issues pertaining to genocide, pertaining to war crimes, pertaining to crimes against humanity, but maintenance of international peace and security. So the thought simply was that I can treat a ruler would say, as they said in the apartheid era, that if we are not challenging international peace and security, then we can treat our own people any way we want. And international human rights law said, no, you cannot. Violation of human rights anywhere is violation of human rights everywhere. And so that is the setting in which today you can see international law is inadequate. International law does not have any, at times, implementation measures, enforcement measures. Each country, 193 prima donnas, they talk about their own sovereignty. And therefore, at the present time, you do see that human rights violations are many places. There is Syria, there is Yemen, there is Afghanistan, and I could name country after country. Countries have tortured people. But today there is a treaty and says you cannot torture. Even President Bush had to change his own terminology. So, two things I want to mention very briefly before I go. One is that human rights have been, unfortunately, trivialized in the sense, trivialized, they have been politicized. And Western countries have used international human rights simply to weaponizing it. That anyone that they did not like, they said the human rights are being violated. Made a distinction between authoritarianism and totalitarianism. And I used to ask that if you are being tortured, can you look up and say, are you an authoritarian or are you totalitarian? If you are authoritarian, you can do it. But the point simply is that unfortunately, that weaponization is a reason today that at times many countries do not believe, do not want international human rights law to be used against them. And so countries keep saying, what happens within our country? Do not intervene, do not interfere. This is within our own sovereignty. And the second issue that I want to mention is that because of Second World War, and after that international human rights law came, and it came in order to see that countries do not oppress their own citizens. That is where humanitarian intervention was. Can't go into any details, but that is today where responsibility to protect is. And that new concept simply is that each country is sovereign. It has got rights, but it must have responsibility. And that responsibility is simply to see that its own citizens, their rights are there, they are not killed, they are protected. And in order to ensure that those rights of citizens are protected, then international community has got some responsibility. One, to assist those countries that do not have the capacity to take care of it, prevent those atrocities. And then, as a last resort, if a country is manifestly unwilling or unable to protect its own citizens, then at that time, international community, through the Security Council, has a responsibility to ensure that people are not killed. That is what happened in Libya when Gaddafi was moving toward Benghazi, eastern city, and he said, all those people who have rebelled, they are like cockroaches, they are like rats. I'm going to kill each one of them. And his forces are moving toward that. And at that time, you remember, Security Council permitted, Britain, France took the lead, United States led from behind, so to speak, and Libya happened, and Gaddafi fell. And then came Syria. And at that time, Russia and China used their own veto. But in any event, I'm going too far. So, two reasons. One, weaponizing human rights by Western powers. And second, that the focus was simply on state not violating human rights of its own people. And therefore, when Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they prepare reports on the US, reports on India, reports in other places, they do not talk about non-state actors. And the question is appropriate. What about those Taliban? What about Al Qaeda? What about all those suicide bombers? What about all those people who say that they cannot tolerate any differences? Contrasted with the Indian tradition, which says we're not simply talking about toleration. Toleration means that I'm superior to you, I tolerate you. Indian Vedic tradition was, I accept you, I respect you, I celebrate you because of the differences. That was Vasudeva Kutumbakam. But the difficulty both weaponizing human rights and human rights simply being used in order to see that a country does not oppress its own people. And so focus on state and focus on states' violations. Now change has happened. As I teach international human rights law, permit PhD and MA students along with law, JD, and LLM students together, and putting law and policy together, we look into non-state actors as well. And so the time has come that not simply the state, but non-state actors also should be targeted as violators of human rights. And those who perpetuate human rights violations, no matter who, not just simply a state, but non-state actors also in the future ought to be taken care of. That on atrocity crimes, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, that at that time, the time has come that those on the Security Council with a veto, and that is the US, Russia, China, Britain, France, that they do not use their veto so that the international community can take action. What happened in the past, you remember that, most of it. Killing fields of Cambodia, genocide in Rwanda, Europe burning middle of it, and all that happened in Bosnia and Kosovo and all. So I think the time has come now in the future that international human rights law is seen not simply in its modern counterpart, but to go back to that tradition that Bharat had. and that is international law, human rights law as dharma, not simply rights but duties, righteousness, and that is what needs to be done in the future. And I hope that it will be done. That each person has a human right to enlightenment, human right to education. Our US Constitution does not talk about positive rights, it's simply negative rights, liberty, freedom. Let the government be off my back. And I think the time has come that we look at both rights and duties, that we look at all aspects, not simply civil and political rights, but economic, social, and cultural rights, rights of all ancient traditions that Adityanji has been working on. Pathakji worked on it for a long period of time. So I think I'm going to stop here. I have taken more time than I should, and my sadhana namaskar to everyone.
Thank you, Nandaji. Thanks a lot for taking us through the history of human rights and connecting it to the contemporary issues, especially highlighting in a remedial manner what actions need to be taken. Very rarely we used to hear about all those remedial actions. Thank you once again. Our next speaker today is Priya Saha. Priya Saha is a women rights and human rights activist, founder of a human rights organization, publisher, and editor of a Bengali newspaper, columnist and researcher from Bangladesh, now on exile in USA. She is the person who brings the missing religion minorities from Bangladesh in public through her research and advocacy. At present, she is the executive director of HRCBM, that is Human Rights Congress for Bangladesh Minorities, is a registered organization under 501c charitable organization in USA and an NGO in special consultative status with United Nations Economics and Social Council. Priyaji, welcome to this webinar.
Namaste to everyone, and I am very glad to hear Vedanandaji. It was my dream to hear personally his speech and to see him, and I am very thankful to uh, American Academy Yoga and Meditation Center organize this webinar and talk about what's happening across the globe. So now I am going to show. I am not expert on human rights international level that much because when we heard about Vedanandaji, we need not to know more about that. I am going to talk about on Bangladesh. So please allow me to share my screen. Uh, or you can share from your panel. That would be great. I have sent that document.
Yes, Priyaji. Yeah.
That would be great. Because Bangladesh, what's happening in Bangladesh, what we have here from Vedanandaji, uh, most of the thing are not exist there. People are dying every day. Can you make it bigger so that I can see? Oh, okay. Okay, what's happening in Bangladesh? You can see my first slide. Um, the on the brink, the saga of Bengali Hindus is continuing slow genocide over past 75 years. If I thought when the country was partitioned in 1947, the population percentage of religion minority and Hindu in Bangladesh part was 29.7%, almost 30%. And now, not now, it's 2011, it's come down 8.4%. So you can easily understand what's happening in Bangladesh. the the country situation, the administration situation, political in all aspect, they are not allowing to stay this indigenous people or son of the soil to be in their country. Every day they are pushing. So every year there are many attack on Hindu. Sometimes is massive, sometimes it's slow. So every day the atrocity on religion minority is taking place, and most unfortunate thing as a state, uh, they are not giving safety and security to their citizen. At the same time, state making enacting some law and snatching land of religion minority. You may hear that there is a law in Bangladesh. It's called Vested Property Act. Through this act, government taken 2.7 million acre land from religion minority. And 2011, they repealed this act, and the act name was Enemy Property or Vested Property Refund Act. But the reality is the government are not giving back land to the religion minority. So 53% of the religion minority community are affected by this law, and every day 637 religion Hindu people are leaving this country, are missing from this country. Most of the case, the violence against the minority, and another thing, the land taken by the government. And through this law, government make people the mentality, they prepare people mentality, so majority people can take a minority land and state is with them. State is not with the religion minority community. So in this concept, when they cooked this concept, when they prepare their majority citizen and the politician, the majority community can do anything, and state will be with these perpetrators, and they are not, off the record. They will not go against the perpetrators. So in that way, the atrocity on minority and killing, torturing, grabbing, raping, burning their home, temple, is taking place every day because the culprit will not be punished. You can say the recent on it. I have shown this picture, after partition, and in the recent past, you can see it's a Bengali slide. But why I showed this slide, because it published in a Daily Star. You can understand the media mentality. Daily Star is leading um, in Bangladesh the English medium, the English newspaper, but they don't want to send this news across the globe what's happening in Bangladesh, so that they use the Bengali news. This slide, you can say the yes, there is means Daily Star slide. They publish it, but they didn't publish it in English. So what you can see, yeah, more in across the country, we have in Bangladesh 64 district, 20 only 26 district have been affected during the Durga Puja, and it's never happened before that time. People are not able to perform their Durga Puja. As you may know, in Bengali culture, Durga Puja is the biggest religious festival of Hindu community in Bangladesh. So this is a 5 days celebration. 5 day puja is like Navaratri, and we and the from in Kumilla district, when the perpetrator attack, they used instrument. Okay, they put their Quran in temple, and yeah, Muslim people did that, and they called police in the morning. And early in the morning, the Muslim community is not supposed to visit the temple, but they go and they show there is a Quran because they put there, and they bring police and did the video, and unfortunately, police went with this Quran at these people when the district commissioner and police superintendent, all people leaving this temple or this minority area, There was a mob, but they live with their police, safety, security, all administration people, but they didn't try. There was not a single police to save this religion minority community. Police also went with the administration. So when they go to their office and the attacker attack the temples and they vandalize temple, they burn home, they attack Hindu people, they taught the mob vandalize all most of the belongings of the Hindus community. And following that day, it's spread across the country, and we celebrate this puja in temple, and there is temporary pandal. So temporary pandal and temple, most of the news they are telling the 335 temple and this pandal were vandalized, and more than five people we know name the Hindu people they killed. They attack ISKCON, and they attack Ramkrishna Mission and all temple in Begum in Chowmuhani, Noakhali. And when the Chowmuhani, the 5 hour together, the atrocity going on, people call police, people call administration. But the administration never pick the phone, and they come after when the vandalizing, burning, killing, everything is over. After 5 hours, the police or law enforcing agency entered the scene. So that is the present situation I am talking. And they raped. So in our culture, when girl raped, they are not disclosing. If they disclose, then the rest of her life will be hell. So they are not disclosing that much. And at the same time, they burned many villages and business places, and more than 600 Hindu people were, injured, and they were hospitalized for a long time. And why it's happening? I am showing another slide from, the third slide. In Prothomalo, this is the world largest published newspaper in Bengali. There was a news in 2013. Some people will be why I am showing, because this is the evidence. If I write, some people will not able to understand this evidence showing within 24 days 319 temple and home were vandalized. What is the in 2013? So, and these people, those people burned, attack, vandalized temple. Bangladesh government never, compensate the people, or they rebuild temple. They didn't do that. At the same time, I want to give you another figure. Bangladesh government making 560 mosques this year, but the budget is 200 million. So you can understand, and every year the religious ministry budget almost 400 million. This budget, all are 99% budget are spent for madrasa education, the imam salary, and hajj, and all are the Islamization thing. They are using this huge money. This amount, this budget is equal to 4 ministry budget. If you say there is a ministry of social welfare, the budget will be on third. There is a ministry of women affairs, the budget of religious ministry and the women affairs ministry, it's on fourth. So what is this religious ministry? You can say in one word is a Islam care or Islam developing ministry. So government using is huge money. There is two things. There is using their money to expand the Islam religion. At the same time, there are people killing, burning the Hindu temple, Buddhist temple, and churches. They are not talking. So in that way, the Islam is glorifying in Bangladesh, and other minority religion are decreasing every day. That is the main reason behind this. The both way government is playing card. I am going to show my fourth slide. You can see there, it's a Bangladesh Protidin. It's another, it's the second largest newspaper in Bangladesh in publication. In 2014, on 11 January, they published this news. 20,000 atrocity taken in 13 years, 20,000 religion minority was attacked, but there was not a single justice. In the newspaper in 2013, and then I am going to show the next slide. It's showing 3,710 attack on Hindus community in last 9 years. That means in 2013, after it is up to 2020. The 13 to 20, this time, this 3,000 attack on Hindu, and government, the law enforcing agency, judiciary system, administration system, nothing helping their community, Hindu community, to stay there, and they are not, the judiciary system are not functioning when victim is religion minority. So the sixth slide, you can see how the population is going down. I told to President of USA that 37 million people are missing, and the Congressman Bob Dole, he told in Congress in 2011 that 49 million Hindus are missing from Bangladesh. And I am showing the last slide, another slide. It's showing I am using the newspaper news for more authentication purpose. So the Dhaka Tribune, another leading English newspaper in Bangladesh, they published this news on the second day, on 11th, on second day of the atrocity, maybe in 15th. They show the law enforcement lack of response during the Kumilla riot lead to greater escalation. So you can understand, they rightly point out that law enforcing agency are not responding, they are not doing anything. That's why the atrocity is or take place across the country. Then you can see in USA, senator talk condemning violence against, and many congressmen also talk against the violence against religion minority. And you can see some protest is taking place across the world. And I'm very glad to Adityanji and all of many organizations in USA and Europe, and in Parliament of Australia, Parliament in England, and here many everywhere people protested what happening in Bangladesh. But our foreign minister circulated his statement, and he told no, there was no rape, no temple were vandalized, 2 people were died, one was drowned to the pond, and another was a normal death. That was our government response. And no, there is no other response, and government are not compensating, they are not doing anything. But what they are doing, due to international pressure, maybe or I don't know why, they arrested some people. But this arrested, you can as an international community, they will not able to understand what's game is what's going in Bangladesh. Yes, when international pressure come on, they arrest some people, and after 2-3 months or 1 month, all will be released on bail. And after 2-3 years, so there will be no trial, nobody will be punished, and their government cannot show example, okay, we punish this. In 2001, There, I have visited one place, maybe someone know that, in Bhola, thousands of girls were raped there, and I went with the two journalists there, and this newspaper, the Daily Star, when we visited the police station and asked what happened here. There was a temporary police station. Okay, there was some violence. So what happened? There's some atrocity taken place on minority and some raped. How much? The police super Rohim, in charge of the police station, he told us 200, say 200 girls were raped, and this 200 was a lead news in Daily Star. And then High Court directed government in 2011 to make a judiciary inquiry, and as High Court directed government, so said they make a judiciary committee, is called Shahabuddin Commission Committee. And Shahabuddin Commission Committee, Justice Shahabuddin Commission Committee submitted a report in 2013, and after 13 years, they found 70, they wrote in their report 60 to 70 girl or women were raped. Okay, and many other, 3,600 case they bring in that judiciary committee report. Unfortunately, it was taken place 2001. At that time, the in power there was Jamaat Islami, more radical party, you know that, and BNP, their alliance government was in power. At that time, present Prime Minister and their party, they told across the world, okay, BNP and Jamaat Islami are doing this, they are perpetrator, they are attacking Hindu, they are attacking the minority. If we, anytime we came in power, we will try them, we will hold them. But unfortunately, Bangladesh government didn't file a single case based on the judiciary committee report. Government make this judiciary committee report, but they are not taking any action. In that way, you can see there is a both party, not both party, you can say all party alliance when they target the religion minority. I am showing this budget, the religion ministry budget, and in religion ministry there is a many way there is budget. It's not incorporated with madrasa education, because a madrasa is under another ministry. In education ministry there is a different secretariat for madrasa education, and for madrasa education our Bangladesh government yearly budget is 8,700 crore taka, and every year it's increasing. And religious ministry budget is 6,500 crore taka, and budget for mosque in 8,500 crore, and budget for temple, and there is another two ministry, the local government ministry and the relief and rehabilitation ministry. Through these two ministry, government Islam care and Islam development or mosque development. And through this government financing, the Islamist group are becoming stronger day by day, and religion minority are missing. That is the main point behind the scene. Through they are using money to throw out the religion minority from Bangladesh. Okay, and how international community can help, and there is many more thing. How much I will tell. So international community can pursue Prime Minister Hasina to empower minority political in economically adapting upon action policy, and nominate as a 60 parliament member, and they, government can recruit the religion minority community and foreign service, RAB, armed force and police, and on other law enforcing agency and judicial system. In that way, the minority community can be stronger, and they need to reduce the religious expansion for Islam care budget, and form a consortium of donor nations headed by US to monitor the human right violation and violence against the minority everywhere, including Bangladesh, to economic aid package. As American Bangladeshi origin, we believe that saving the minorities Bangladesh is a moral obligation on the part of United States, but containing Islamist extremism in country is also America's own interest, because United States of America is every Islamic jihadist primary target. And finally, government need to act now, immediately start processing the persecuting and pursuing the criminal who have brutalized the minority Hindu community and Buddhists in October 13, forming a special tribunal, providing adequate compensation to the victim, um, and financial help, and stop promoting Salafi Wahhabi Islam or intolerant brand of Islamist that IS practice by sticking regulating of standardizing was mahfil and khutbah, uh, requiring Qawmi Madrasa to respect constitution, the national anthem, strictly monitor their funding source, and routinely examine their cultural textbook. Thank you so much for hearing me and giving me this opportunity. I don't know, maybe I have taken more time. I'm sorry for that, because I need to talk about on behalf of my country. Thank you so much for organizing this program. If you have any
Yeah.
question, I'm ready to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Priyaji. Thanks for uh, highlighting this horrifying and shocking truth. Uh, it's really makes us emotional, but thanks for realizing the truth to all through this webinar. Thank you once again. Our with this, I would like to invite our next guest, Dr. Adityanji. Dr. Adityanji is a physician, psychiatrist, thinker, and intellectual who focuses on human rights, public policy, geopolitics, and strategic studies. He studied for his MBBS at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and completed his MD in psychiatry from the same institution. He has practiced as a psychiatrist in 4 different countries in 3 different continents. His last academic position was as Associate Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Currently, he is in private practice in Cleveland, Ohio. He lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He has his other socio-political interest pertaining to human rights and religious freedom. He is the founding president and chairperson of board of directors of a non-profit organization, International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom, ICHRRF. It focuses on the rights of persecuted and marginalized minorities worldwide. Dr. Adityanji also leads a think tank named the Council of Strategic Affairs. His articles on geopolitics and strategic affairs are well published and well appreciated for incisive analysis. He has given talks and lectures on these subjects in various think tanks. He has consistently advocated for strong partnership between India and US as co-equal democracies and not as senior and junior partners. Adityanji, welcome to the session.
Namaste. Thank you very much indeed to the organizers, American Academy of Yoga and Medicine, Ganga Mississippi Dialogue, for inviting me. I would say namaste, good morning, good day, and suprabhatam to all our viewers. I also thank my distinguished panelists, Professor Vednanda and Mrs. Priya Saha, for giving their distinguished presentations and, enlightening all of us on human rights and problems of religious persecution. I'm going to start with sharing my screen, and I wonder whether you can share my screen. Chaitanya ji?
Yes, Adityanji.
Okay, very good. So the topic has already been introduced. This is the country I'm going to talk about, Afghanistan, showing its geostrategic location. And I'll be talking about human rights violation in Afghanistan. As I said, I am very, very thankful to Professor Nanda for introducing the, topic of human rights across the globe. I think there has been just unifocal emphasis on human rights. When we talk about human rights, we also should be talking about human dignity, human duties, human responsibilities, which has now been enshrined in United Nations by R2P, responsibility to protect. But simultaneously, we cannot avoid a discussion on human rights and terrorism, human rights and non-state actors, human rights violation as state policy, human rights and state-sponsored terrorism, and we have to balance human rights, state sovereignty, and safety of the citizens in the current complex geopolitical situation. So when we talk about human rights situation in Afghanistan and Taliban, etc., I think we need to be aware of the history. That part of the world has been fairly disturbed part of the world with frequent warfares between the locals as well as colonizing empires with numerous deaths. So what is happening today is culmination of that there has really not been much peace in Afghanistan. Let's review a little bit of Afghanistan's recent history. Although Taliban control Afghanistan, who are majority Pashtuns, Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country with Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, Imaks, Turkmen, Baloch, and other unspecified categories. Unfortunately, what people do not realize that there's ethnic cleansing and cultural genocide happening in Afghanistan even prior to Taliban. If you look at 2012 census, Sunni Islam was 90%, Shia Islam was 9.7%, and other religions were only 0.3%. But if you look at the religious composition of Afghanistan in 1947, Islam constituted only 84% of the population. Sikhism was one of the major religions, 8.2%, Buddhism 2.5%, Hinduism 2.1%, and others were 3.1%. So religious persecution, ethnic cleansing, and cultural genocide in Afghanistan is not new, but it's got a new dimension at this point in time. Let's look at who created Taliban. Literal meaning of the word Taliban is students. They were created in 1994 by Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency. Money was supplied by CIA from US for quote-unquote mujahideen. Prime Minister of Pakistan at that time was very progressive and secular Benazir Bhutto, and her Minister of Interior, Nasirullah Babar, had claimed openly that they created Taliban. ISI was the agency tasked with creation of Taliban in Deobandi madrasas in Pakistan. So Taliban from 1994 to 1996 were a warring militia created by Pakistan. From 1996 to 2001, they controlled the first government in Afghanistan. In 2002 to 2021, they were in insurgency mode, and now they constitute the second government of Taliban-led government in Afghanistan. The period of Taliban rule from 1996 to 2001 was darkest time for religious minorities, especially non-Islamic minorities. Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan were constantly harassed, persecuted, killed for showing slightest display of their faiths, and they had their properties forcibly taken away. Kidnapping and murders of Hindus and Sikhs were rampant. Taliban even forced Hindus and Sikhs to wear a yellow armband for identification, reminiscent of Yellow Star of David that Jews were forced to wear in Nazi Germany. In 2001, Taliban destroyed the historic Bamiyan Buddha statues that were carved into mountains. In fact, in their first rule in Afghanistan, in a single day, in a single town, 15,000 Hazara ethnic minorities that were Shia were slaughtered. So that is the history of Taliban. There are reports that there were 700,000 Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan in 1970s. During 1980s, the estimate suggested a sharp decline to about 200 to 300,000. An investigation by Tolo News, which is an Afghan news agency, reported that nearly 99% of Hindu Sikhs left Afghanistan in last 3 decades, revealing that Sikhs and Hindu population dropped to 15,000 when Mujahideen were in power during the war in 1990s and remained at that level during Taliban regime. And then it was estimated that only 1,350 Hindus and Sikhs remained in that country. These are the UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Bamiyan Buddhas. Smaller Buddha was 38 meters tall, carved into mountain, and the larger Buddha was 55 meters carved into mountain. And here in this map, you see the location of Bamiyan Buddha. It's in central Afghanistan. And this was done in 2001 by Taliban. So religious persecution has gone on in Afghanistan, irrespective of who has been the ruler. In 2018, a suicidal bomber in Jalalabad targeted a crowd of Afghan Hindus and Sikhs who had arrived to meet the then President Ashraf Ghani. The attack killed 19 people, wounded 10 others, including Sikh and Hindu community leaders. In March 2020, a 6-hour-long siege of Sikh temple in Kabul killed 25 people and injured 8 others. There are reports that there are only 2 to 4 gurdwaras left in Afghanistan and a single Hindu temple after Taliban takeover now. These religious sites have been now a safe place for Hindus and Sikhs, but with widespread persecution, the temples and gurdwaras have become not just religious places, but living quarters where people are living because they are fearful of going out in public. Very recently, after coming to power, Taliban removed the Nishan Sahib, the religious flag of Sikhs, from their Gurdwara because they didn't want Muslims to see that flag from a distance, and they tied it to a tree so that it is not seen from far and wide. Only 50 Hindus were left. They were all evacuated except for one Pujari, Pandit Rajesh Kumar, in Ratan Nath temple in Kabul. He refused to leave when Taliban came. He said he was willing to die. There are less than 206 left in Afghanistan. Initially, Taliban 2.0 version did not allow them to leave the country. They were confined to Gurdwara. 2 Afghan Sikh MPs were evacuated to India. Taliban now demand that Sikhs convert to Islam if they have to live in Afghanistan. People have said in international community that Taliban 2.0 is very different from original Taliban. Yes, they are more sophisticated. Yes, some of them can speak English. But they have been duplicitous with fake assurances and false promises. While their central leadership gave conciliatory statements to the press in the beginning, in provinces they were going door to door, arresting and killing minorities, including Shias, Hazaras, gays, and women. They were also going door to door to quote unquote kidnap women to be married to Taliban fighters. Women are not allowed to work, and women's protest ended violently. Taliban have killed a number of female judges and female lawyers in Afghanistan. They've openly stated that they will impose Sharia law not only in Afghanistan, but also in the entire world. They also want to intervene in Indian Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So my message to international community, the UN relief agencies, and international NGOs is that leopard never changes its spots. Taliban 2.0 ideologically and doctrinally are as virulent and as dangerous as Taliban 1.0. Taliban 2.0 again is not a homogeneous group. There were various shuras involved, at least 4 shuras, including one in Qatar. They are supported still by ISI, General Headquarters of Military, Pakistani Prime Minister. They are in loose alliance with other terror groups, including Haqqani Network, Al Qaeda, TTP, Daesh, or Islamic State in Khorasan province, and other terrorist groups. Their infighting led to delay in their government formation, which has not been recognized by any country because it is dominated by the Haqqani network. So we know there's a problem. What can we do about this problem? Actually, on 14th of August, Taliban captured Afghanistan and Kabul. The previous president fled. On August 16, I wrote a piece on a website called boloji.com. And rather than reciting what Taliban have done, what Taliban are doing, I have suggested the way forward to the United Nations and international community, especially NGOs, how to contain Taliban. I have suggested a 12-point action program for UN and international community as a way forward. First is that United Nations Security Council must invoke the Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter that authorizes both military and non-military action in the Afpak region. United Nations must not give recognition to Taliban 2.0 control regime in Afghanistan because you are supporting a terrorist control regime. Next step should be declaring Afghanistan and FATA region and the KP province of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan as UN protectorates to be directly governed by United Nations rather than by a ragtag militia of Taliban. The FATA and KP province of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan have to be secured to prevent free flow of terrorist movements from one sanctuary across the border to other side. The World Bank, the IMF, and the Asian Development Bank should not give low interest credits or loans to Taliban controlled regime. Financial sanctions must be hard from the beginning, as Taliban spokesperson have already started talking about extending Sharia law all over the world. That is their goal. China should be persuaded not to give loans to Taliban because there are Chinese controlled financial institutions like AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the Shanghai headquartered NDB, New Development Bank of the BRICS. The China is, try to circumvent the international financial institutions like IMF and World Bank and Asian Bank, but other members of these Chinese controlled institutions must put a veto so no soft loans are given to Taliban control Afghanistan. Taliban's violation of human rights, women's rights, and illegal narcotic trade calls for their criminal trials for the crimes against humanity through International Court of Justice in The Hague. For sake of humanity, the Taliban terrorists must not be given a free pass, and a process akin to Nuremberg trials must be instituted to bring them to justice for their past and present crimes. Strict financial sanctions must be imposed on the Islamic Republic of Pakistan for its complicity. And it should be put on not just the gray list of the FATF, but on the black list of the FATF, so that it does not continue to provide sanctuary and material assistance to Taliban. The final step involves deployment of UN peacekeeping forces that can enforce peace, maintain law and order, and have the proper mandate to fire on Taliban fighters and contain and defang the Taliban's terrorist network and other non state jihadi actors. The United Nations mandate must involve demilitarization of the Afpak region, the terrorist networks, and confiscation and destruction of all the advanced weapons worth $85 billion that were abandoned by the fleeing US forces. The United Nations must take adequate steps so that Pakistan's nuclear weapons are out of reach of Taliban 2.0, Al Qaeda, Haqqani network, and other terrorist groups, because their aim is definitely to have access to Pakistan's nuclear bomb. So it's a grave situation about human rights in Taliban controlled Afghanistan. International community has a lot on its plate. They should stop using one-dimensional view of human rights, because as we speak, UN agencies and international NGOs are still hobnobbing with Taliban to provide them more relief, more aid, while they continue to indulge in ethnic cleansing, religious persecution, killing of women, killing of female judges, and imposing Sharia law. Any aid to Afghanistan's civilian population has to be subject to conditionalities so that the governing institutions in that region are changed by the international community before any significant aid is given. There has to be balance between human rights and geopolitics, and we cannot continue as international community to basically aid a murderous regime that has taken control of that territory. They have the power to control the country, but they do not know governance. And that is why that regime needs to be replaced by a UN protectorate so that the civilian population is saved. Lastly, I will say that for last 70 years, we have been talking about right to return for Palestinian refugees. There has to be a right to return for ethnic minorities that have been cleansed from Afghanistan. These are the original inhabitants of Afghanistan, the Hindus and Sikhs. And with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adityanji. Thanks for this detailed micro level information talking about the ethical cleansing which has created a kind of demographical inequilibrium which need a robust response from at the international community level. We all agree on that part, and also highlighting the way forward, how with your suggestions how we can go ahead. Thanks a lot. We are already short of the time, but we have a lot of questions. We can take few of the questions before we end this session. Thank you. So you have covered most of the part during your speech, Nandaji, Adityanji, and Sahaji. But we have a couple of questions around the way forward. How, because the question looks like is most of the nations across the world have their own voices on discrimination. But do you feel that Human Rights Commission is focusing more on certain countries and not focusing everywhere? Nandaji, you're on mute. you need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. I might begin on that. Uh, the sad part is that Human Rights Commission that was established by the United Nations had become politicized. In that commission, where countries are elected by the Security Council and the General Assembly, they had targeted Israel more than anybody else. And on that commission, many human rights violators, they were sitting there. And so Human Rights Commission, having set up that body by the General Assembly, was changed to the Human Rights Council. At that time, the American Bar Association had sent some recommendation to the United Nations, and I was very fortunate to be working on that small group of people that sent the recommendation on Human Rights Council. Today we have Human Rights Council, not the Human Rights Commission for the United Nations, and that council has been doing very good work, but it also again is politicized. So I think the sad part is that, as Adityanji mentioned, those are absolutely wonderful suggestions. But in the United Nations, the only body that can work and make a decision is the Security Council. On the Security Council are these veto wielding powers. And on the United Nations taking any action on Afghanistan, there is going to be Russia and there is going to be China. Either one of them can veto it. And so, action to be taken by the United Nations at the present time, I wish that could be done. Adityanji has very good suggestions, but at this stage in the United Nations, nothing is going to happen in terms of taking a unanimous action or the action by 9 members of the Security Council, where none of these veto wielding powers um, use their veto. And so the sad part is that the Commission and now the Council, as you asked, Chaitanyaji, it is politicized. But it has done some very good work because it has got some wonderful opportunities. It can appoint rapporteurs. They have done wonderful work. And those rapporteurs are the ones that were responsible for having the treaty on torture, for having the treaty on people disappeared, for having many other treaties and many other declarations. It also has every few years a periodical review of many countries' human rights situations. And that is where the United States, where all these countries have got to give their reports and then appear and respond to questions. And the sad part is that the United States itself, which at the present time has been required by the Congress, by the State Department, to present annual report on human rights situation in other countries. Because based upon that report, the United States can provide aid, the United States can have its own relations with those countries. And that report itself is politicized in the sense that those countries that were close to the US, when they have human rights violations, they are not taken into account. So it's not necessarily commission, but it's omission. They might omit all that part. At one time, a few years ago, my students and I, we examined those reports and found that almost all reports were deficient in not paying adequate attention to every country evenly. Friends are taken into account, violations omitted, and I'll stop here. But the point simply is that question that you have raised is commission is politicized, and Commission at the present time has been targeting some countries much more than others. And on that council today, not the Commission, but sit all those countries that themselves are violators of human rights.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for these details. I'll take a couple of more questions in the interest of time, and then we will go to the end of the session. So, Adityanji, maybe this question will be for you. How the psychology is related with human rights? Is it a kind of behavior modification or anything beyond that?
I think it's a very, very important question and very complex question. So, when we talk about human behavior and human psyche, there are gradients of responses and gradients of thinking, variations in thinking. You know, not everybody is going to be good. Not everybody is going to have positive traits. And sometimes the leaders also have psychopathic traits, and unfortunately the leaders who violate the human rights situations in their countries or in their groups or against other groups, whether they are ethnic other groups or religious other groups, some of these leaders are successful because they have psychopathic traits. I think it is very, very common to quote unquote other a different group. I'll tell you that the main discourse in this country when we talk about racism is white versus black racism. What about white versus Native American racism? What about white on brown racism? What about black on brown racism? What about black on Asian racism? So there are a lot of nuances of behavior, and it is not a unidimensional phenomenon, human rights violation. It's a question of
Looks like we lost
and at the
Adityanji.
same time. So it's a very complex question. We need to keep open minds and we need to keep balanced viewpoints.
Yeah, thank you, Adityanji. Uh, Next question is what can be done or what you are expecting for Bangladeshi human right protections from the international community? Maybe Priyaji?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about again about my expectation. My expectation to all human rights activists and organizations, please inform the world what's happening in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is known as moderate Muslim country, but it's not moderate. They know uh, the world know Bangladesh is giving uh, you know, rehabilitating or giving shelter 0.7 million Rohingya people, and they are getting billion dollar funding and giving all honor. Yeah, at the same time, world need to know Bangladesh is pushing its own citizens, the indigenous people and Hindu community. They are welcoming Rohingya or giving shelter Rohingya because their religion identity. At the same time, for the religion identity purpose, people they are pushing people to go out. And yes, Human Rights Commission or Human Rights Council need to send a special rapporteur to see the religion minority situation, and government uh, international community make to hold Bangladesh government to submit a report how they are going to protect their own citizen, how with a timeline, and when they are going to uh, make trial all perpetrators, and why all they cannot make an enabling environment to make to keep their own citizen in their own country. At the same time, we need the media people. Media can raise voice if international media and all people you are talking, you talk about them. then this moderate, the quote unquote moderate Muslim country, it will thrown out. They will be colored as Afghanistan, and it is Pakistan and Afghanistan. Next is Bangladesh, and uh, Bangladesh government need to act. They need to submit a report to UN and all United States and USA and everywhere how they are going to save its own citizen, and when they are going to bring back the citizen they send to India and elsewhere, and when they are giving back the vested property government confiscated from Hindu community. So in that way, the international community can make hold Bangladesh government.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Priyaji.
I might add a footnote, Chaitanyaji. Bangladesh is dependent for aid. Bangladesh is dependent for other countries' good wishes. United States is the one that can put a great deal of pressure on Bangladesh. I have written personally, but I have asked other groups, and especially human rights groups, to put a great deal of pressure on the White House, on the United States government, to put pressure upon the Bangladesh government. The Prime Minister of Bangladesh has been saying loudly and clearly that it's taking all action needed in order to protect Hindus and minorities. And that's not true. And so the United States can put pressure. And I have spoken, talked with the ambassador of Bangladesh and asked again the Bangladesh Prime Minister in order to ensure to the world that minorities would be protected. Second, pressure from India. India has relations that are cordial with Bangladesh. There are geopolitical considerations, but India needs to put pressure. And at the same time, human rights organizations, because I've served on the um, Amnesty International coordinating body and advisory council. So put pressure upon those human rights organizations that already have been speaking, but speak loudly and clearly in order to put pressure on Bangladesh. So I think the pressure from outside, Adityanji talked about IMF, about the World Bank. So financial, economic, political, diplomatic, all kind of pressures from governments, human rights organizations, academics like me, all that is needed at the present time in order to see that Bangladesh government at the present time change its attitude and make law enforcement possible so that these minorities are protected. It's practically genocide, as Priyaji said, and that ought to stop.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you
Nandaji.
so much for your great recommendation.
Yeah, I would like to just have a quick kind of 30-second concluding statement from each of you. Let's start with Priyaji.
I'm pretty thankful to get this opportunity, and I'm requesting on behalf of 80 million Bangladeshi religion minority community to all of you, raise your voice. We Bangladeshi indigenous community, son of the soil, we don't want to leave our country. Please help us so that we can stay in our motherland. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priyaji. Adityanji.
I'll take this opportunity to familiarize our viewers about the work of International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. This institution was founded because of lack of satisfaction with the existing agencies, whether they are UN governed agencies, whether they are domestic agencies of United States or international human rights NGOs. Human rights has become a political weapon and actually an industry. And the shortcomings have been actually enumerated by Professor Nanda very, categorically. And in that background, we started this initiative. I would suggest our viewers to join our initiative. Go to our website, which is www.ichrf.org. ichrrf.org, attend our activities, contribute financially, and I am happy to announce that ICHRRF will be doing hearings on Bangladesh on December 11th. We have a panel of speakers who will be, giving their viewpoints, and we plan to, publicize that very widely. So it's a new initiative, and it's the correct initiative because it is giving due importance to rights of everyone in the spirit of Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhavet. Namaste.
Thank you.
Chaitanya-ji, thank you very much for taking this topic. Kindly give my regards to Indrani-ji and all the officers of the organization. I am so glad that you took this initiative. And Priya-ji, thank you for saying all that you have done in Bangladesh. And Adityan-ji, wonderful work. So thank you, Chaitanya-ji.
Thank you all. Thanks, Priyaji. Thanks, Adityanji, for joining
Be
us.
with
Thank you.
us and save us. I do not want to say more. Please save our life.
Yeah, absolutely. We all agree. We need to do a lot. A lot of things are much needed. Thank you, Nandaji, for blessing us through this webinar. And it is an honor to be part of this webinar. Thanks to AYM. I was more on the learning mode, and I got it much more than that. Thank you. Thanks, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chetanji, for hosting this session and holding the whole program together. I would also like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much. There is so much to take back from this webinar and so much of information, recommendations that, if put into place, will actually make a difference. So thank you so much, Vednandaji. Thank you, Priyaji. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji, for such an active participation for AYM's webinar today. And as for our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned while we come up with our next programs, next webinars. And as for our viewers, we would like to thank you once again. And please log on to www.aaymonline.org to learn more about our organization and our programs. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Namaskar.